Managing Director of the IMF, Kristalina, thank you for joining us in this interview, this time in Washington, during those annual meetings that we all wait for to know the latest about the IMF projections. Let us start about the global economy. You have been talking about less debt, more growth, and you have been talking about the fight against inflation to have succeeded substantially at this point, yet there are still some risks. What are the major risks that could lead back to inflation increasing again?
Well, let's start with the good news. Inflation is down and interest rates are starting to follow. And that has been achieved without the world economy slipping into recession. It is the first time when we would have a major inflation episode and we won't end up in a recession. So let's celebrate we got that. What are the risks? First, central banks calibrating wrongly, either cutting too fast and as a result inflation returns, or cutting too slow and suffocating growth. Second, the attention not moving swiftly to the fiscal front. What we face today is in all countries, as a result of the shocks we have experienced, fiscal buffers are exhausted, they're gone. So countries have to start rebuilding them because we don't know what is waiting for us around the corner. And at the same time, they have to support pro-growth policies. Why? Because growth is slow and debt is high. And the solution to low growth, high debt is high growth. So how to strike that balance between investing in people, in infrastructure for growth, and at the same time building buffers for the future, this is going to be a very tough choice. And I want to finish with the third risk for all of us, and it is the fragmentation in the world economy. For the first time in the last years, trade is no more the traditional engine of growth. It is actually moving slower than economic growth. Mm-hmm. And we have to work towards repairing the functioning of the world economy so we can help, especially emerging markets, developing countries, to have an opportunity to grow.
What about exogenous variables, Mrs. Georgieva? When we're talking about the current escalation in the Middle East, the geopolitical situation that is getting worse every day. So in case this escalates more, it leads to the disruption of major shipping trade or shipping and trade lines. This might lead to the increase in price of commodities. When I asked earlier this week about this, they told me that in the spring meeting, they estimated that this will lead to an increase of around 0.7% in inflation, and it will decrease the global output or the global GDP by 0.5%. I asked if this is an optimistic number. They said that this has been the estimate of the spring meetings. Why didn't the IMF so far revise this number? Do you think this might be revised downwards towards the global GDP and more inflation? And could this pose a risk again?
Well, the very sad reality is that conflicts are terrible for people. They're also bad for the economy. My heart goes to the families of those that are affected, and all my sympathy to the countries in the Middle East that are at the epicenter, but also those that are feeling the tragedy that is occurring there. We have seen also the negative economic impact of this conflict. In the epicenter, it is dramatic in Gaza, West Bank, also quite negative for Egypt, for Jordan, very negative for Lebanon, where now they are becoming part of that epicenter. For the region as a whole, we have revised our growth projections downward by 0.6% vis-a-vis April. So we are now projecting growth at only 2.1%. And we are very concerned that if there is spiraling up of these tensions, that can be very harmful to the whole region. Take, for example, Egypt. What is happening is taking away 70% of the revenues from the Suez Canal. This is a massive loss for Egypt. So what we are hoping to see, of course, is calming down of the conflict, first and foremost for the well-being of people, but also because of the a negative impact on the regional economy and also negative impact on the whole world. That the fact that there are active wars, a third year of war in Ukraine, a second year of war in the Middle East, dents confidence.
Is the IMF worried that this might lead to the increase in the price of major commodities, agricultural commodities, and oil and other energy commodities that might lead to a spike in inflation globally again?
Well, there is a bit of impact already because the shipping costs have gone up as a result of these tensions. And what we have seen is that the concern about return of more inflation is there. We are not yet observing actual impact, and commodity prices, oil price, gas prices have been holding fairly steady. That is really a subject to what next on the security front.
All right, now let's speak about the efforts in the Middle East, the global efforts to assist the countries mostly affected by this situation, sadly, Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, and the other countries. Before we migrate in our discussion toward Egypt, let's talk about assisting and rescuing efforts for the Palestinian territories and for Lebanon. How will the IMF be able to support? I know that the World Bank might have programs in line for that, but how would the IMF be able to support this on the global front?
Yeah. Our contribution is twofold. One, we provide the assessment of the economic situation and what can be done to improve it. And second, in the case of Lebanon, we actually have a staff-level agreement that is now years old. Should the political situation stabilizes and there is a path for us to move forward with the program for Lebanon, of course we will do it. We are also an important factor of stabilizing the rest of the region. We have two very sizable programs with Jordan and with Egypt. I actually plan to go to Egypt exactly because of our concern of the spillover impact of this conflict on a very important economy, on the economy of Egypt.
All right, I will ask you more about Egypt, but just because you mentioned Lebanon and you said that there is an agreement between the IMF and Lebanon, and that has been before the war, and it was tied to many conditions that the Lebanese government has to abide by the reforms that are necessary at this point. Would any aid at this point be also conditioned with those reforms, or will it be considered, will Lebanon be considered a country in dire circumstances and the reforms might be, put aside for now?
Of course we will revisit because conditions have changed. My point is that we stand ready to support Lebanon.
All right. Now let's talk about Egypt. You said that you will visit Cairo in 10 days and that you will know more about what's happening there. We heard President Sisi's remarks a few days earlier about the current economic situation and the reforms that Egypt has already started implementing. What are the current conditions that the IMF might be able to revisit and reconsider when it comes to the Egypt program?
Let me say that I admire the will of the Egyptian government and President Sisi to reform the economy. It is for Egypt, not for the fund. A strong, vibrant economy will attract more foreign investment, will make the money of savers in Egypt work harder for the Egyptian people. We are always looking at what has changed and does that require an adjustment in the program, and we will do that this time again. We're bringing some good news for Egypt. We have reformed our charges and surcharges, bringing the cost to our borrowers down. The savings for Egypt over the course of our program would be $800 million. That is a very significant saving. So in a way, we are responding to this call for the fund to do all we can to help our more vulnerable members with this reduction of charges and surcharges.
That is good news. You mentioned earlier today in the press conference the 3 billion, how it has increased to 8 billion, which was a substantial increase, and that has been a great help to Egypt at this point. Is there any way that there would be more assistance in the coming near future?
Yes, we are going to discuss with Egypt the Resilience and Sustainability Facility that is supporting our members with climate-related reforms. And that is a very important source of long-term concessional financing, 20 years repayment, 10 and a half years grace period, so that can be another injection in economic financial support for Egypt from the fund.
Last comment before your time, because I know you are very busy, Madam غورغييفا. When it comes to the bilateral agreement between countries about trade in their own currencies, which is being discussed rigorously now in the BRICS meetings, and Egypt is also considering that probably with other countries, would this decrease the debt burden on those countries, especially that most of this debt is in US dollars?
The decision of how countries trade with each other is a sovereign choice. What we look at from the fund is, are these deals transparent, accountable to the people in the country? And we are always very interested to see more vibrancy in trade. So anything that is done to return trade to be an engine of growth is, of course, helpful for the world economy, helpful for our individual members.
Thank you, Mrs. غورغييفا, for this interview. It's always lovely to have you, and we're always thrilled to have you at الشرق Business with Bloomberg. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Great to be with you.